So at this stage in the build, it's very much up to you which way you want to go, working up, working down. We've got to get all the planks on eventually anyway. Like I've said before, this will look different for everybody, but the principle of what we're doing is the same for everybody. So I've already tapered, because I know I've got 4 planks to go in there and roughly 3 planks width there. I'm taking 2mm off each, so a 2mm taper. Same rule applies wherever the plank feels like it's starting to cross over, which was here. That's where I'm starting my taper. And I'm not tapering the rear. This bit here gets tricky when we get to this area here where it's sort of changing shape. So you can see that we've got a plank that wants to go that way still, but we've also got a plank that wants to go that way. So it gets a little bit tricky, and there's different ways of tackling it, but you can see that naturally it's wanting to create a gap. Now, it's not a very big gap, so we can fill it. The other thing that you can do is, when you get a bit more experience, is you can cut out, so you can put a bigger fillet in. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep it simple, let it naturally fall the way it wants to fall, and then we'll sort it when we're sanding and filling everything. It also gets a little bit difficult because we've got overhanging planks here to see exactly where we're up to, so we can sort it out when we tidy up. So I'm just going to leave that one for now. So I've made my my mark, I've tapered my plank, and we're ready to glue all of that into place. Say I have bent this plank. I've used the dry plank bending method, and it will help with how that plank sits when we come to install it. But don't worry about how untidy this is looking. It's just something we will sort. And what I'm trying to do is do it in a way so that any issues that could possibly come up we've got, so I can show you how to sort them in the next stage. But you want to try and keep the planks buttered together as closely as you can, and keep test fitting. So here it's pushing away a little bit. I probably need to take my taper back a little bit further, and that will help it sit. So we can just follow the line of the taper and extend it back a little bit further. So we just keep test fitting until we've got as good a fit as we can get. There you go, you see that's already starting to sit better. So I think we're ready for gluing in. You've seen me do this before. It's the same process. We don't change it for any other process. We just keep making sure we've got glue on all the bulkheads and on the plank in between, so that we've got lots of strength for the next steps. And when you start getting towards the end after this plank, it will become easier, rather than to pin it, to clamp it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put a clamp on that back edge there and keep that nice and tight, and hopefully it'll keep that nicely pushed against that and keep it nice and tight. But you can see that our plank is buttered nicely against that on the full length, so we're nearly getting there, and our as we taper, it'll start to really look the part, and the more we can get these to be in contact with each other, the less work we're creating on the next stage. So I'm just going to put that clip back on there, and I'll come back to you when that's all dried. So we are ready to put our next plank on, and we're going back to the upper row, and we're in a position now where we need roughly 3 planks to fill this gap, 2 and a bit planks to fill that gap, and just about 2, maybe a fraction over 2, to fill this gap here. So we are going to end up doing some shaping. Now there's all sorts of different ways of doing this, there's all sorts of science you can apply to it, but because we're doing it as a beginner, what we're going to do is we're going to do it as per the instructions and just keep laying the planks and tapering them. So first of all, we need to think about how acute our angle needs to be on the front here before we put our taper in. So if I get my top corner of the plank to terminate at the edge there, and then mark off roughly where we need it to end there, that gives me what I need to cut off the plank to start with. So we can just nip that off. Like so. So that's giving us a nice lead-in shape. You can see that's fitting quite nicely there. So that's good. But now we need to know, right, where's our taper? So by holding the end of the plank there, I can get to what is my center point. We'll mark that out so we can reference that. And right, where's my taper going to be? You can see naturally the plank wants to go all the way up there. That's not really the correct way of doing it, although there's no reason why you shouldn't do it on the bottom, because we're going to cover it. You're not going to see it, and as long as we've covered the hull, it really doesn't matter. But it will create a gap, and you're going to have to then fill that gap. So let's try and keep going with the tapering, and naturally my my plank wants to start crossing over at this point here. So yeah, so we're going to taper that by, if we look at this, 1, 2, we're getting about 2 1/3 planks in. So if we taper this by 2/3, and then we'll see where we are next time. So when I say taper by 2/3, I mean leave 2/3 of the plank left. So roughly, we take 1/3 off. Okay, and then you'll see when we do the last plank that we're probably tapering quite heavily at both ends. So mark that off wrong. Obviously we're tapering at the top, so it's 1/3 down, not 1/3 up. So I've just corrected that, just making sure that you were aware. There we go, not so bad. So where's my curve starting from? Pretty much from the start of the taper. You can see my distance between my indents is about 5 millimeters, but I'm not measuring it, as you can see. I'm just drawing it back a little bit with my thumb and then doing another one. Now if your taper has got quite thin at the end, what you can do is drill a pilot hole for your nail, and that will just help prevent the wood from splitting. I can't guarantee it will avoid it completely, but it does definitely appear to help. So there we go, that's sitting down there quite nicely now. Our line seems to have moved in that process, but that doesn't matter. It was really about lining the front up, but we'll just sort that out ready for gluing, because that's the visual aid we've got when we're gluing, and we start in the middle. And then now we need to have a look at the back of that plank. Going to have a small gap at the back, but not much, so we can go with glue up until that one there, and then if we glue in between there on the plank, and then that'll make sure that we've got glue on all our contact points there. Right, we're ready to put that one on. Now the other thing I should say is, now that we're lying against this, we can be holding the back end on with a clamp, so we don't want all this excess material here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it short so that it overhangs a little bit, but not too much. So cut it there, and we're good to go. So let's get our glue down. So plenty at this front bit here, making sure that we've got it along that bulkhead and along the ridge of the previous plank. Right, so that is our glue down. I couldn't remember exactly how far it was before the plank parted company, so I know I've put too much down, but we can just wipe that off when we're ready. So make sure we've got our knives and things out of the way. We don't want any accidents. And we'll get our bits and pieces out of the way there, and we're ready to drive these nails in. So just like we've done with all the other planks, we'll start at our middle point, and what we can do now is put a clip on that end, which will hold that nice and tight, and then I'm just going to drive a pin in that last part there, and then as per usual just get the glue out, particularly where we've got this gap, because we absolutely don't want any glue blocking the plank that we put in there. So get a little cocktail stick or a bit of wire or something with a point and just get that glue out of there. Make sure there's nothing on these bulkheads. You can see there's a bit of glue there. We just need to get rid of that. There we go. So, happy with that. We can now think about the next plank, but because we've got the clip in the way, it's going to be a little bit difficult. So what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate on doing that one next. So what you should have is some offcuts from tapering your planks, and these are going to come in very handy for these little wedges we need to do. So let's take a look at what we've got got quite a few different offcuts, so if we just get them out and just have a mess around, and what you're doing is you're seeing if you've got something that'll do the widest end, to be honest, and I don't think we do. No. So what we're going to do is we're going to take something that's long enough to do the job. That one will be. Yep. Okay, so that one's long enough, and what we're going to start by doing is getting the width right. I can never quite remember the terminology. I'm not good at remembering that sort of stuff. But I believe, someone might correct me here, I believe it's a steeler at the back and a dropper at the front. Whatever it is, it's a wedge. Now, this isn't how it was done on the original ships, but we're doing a layer of wood to shape the hull that's never going to be seen. So it doesn't matter. So we start by understanding how much width we need between that point, and the answer is full width. So if we put that to the point, the furthest way forward it can go, which is about there, and mark where the plank ends, and that's the top point. Remember, you've got an angle here, it's not straight up, so that's the top point, so that's about there. Doesn't matter if we're a bit longer. So from that point to that point is what we want to cut. Now my experience is that once you've cut it, it never quite goes up as far into there as you want, so it always hangs out a bit further than you thought it would at the back. So, but that really doesn't matter. And then we're going to cut it in the same way as we've cut all of them. So we'll put it up there. Get our steel rule against our 2 points. Okay, we've cut our part out now, and we can ram it into the narrow end there, and we can see we've still got a bit of a gap. Actually, it's not a perfect fit, so we can use another offcut and wedge that in. Now you could fill it. We are going to have a look at filling anyway, but I prefer to fill it with wood if I can. So I'd rather do that, drive that in, glue it in, and then sand it flush later on. So that's what we're going to do. So now we've got those two parts that we can put in. That was from tapering of one of the other planks. We can now flood this area with glue. Now, because we are sort of pushing these in tight, we shouldn't need any nails. It should just sit where we want it to sit. So push it in, ram it into place so it's nice and tight there. And then we're going to wedge it in with this wedge here. There we go, that's nice and tight as well. There we go. Job done. And it doesn't look pretty, but it's going to do the job. And that's all we really need to care about right now. There you go, just making sure it's nice and flat. If you feel like you need to put a nail in, put a nail in, but I know that's going to be okay. So I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, we can leave that to dry now. So I'm going to go away and do the other side, and then I'll come back to you when this has dried a bit. Okay, 2 planks left to do, and it's obvious by the shape and size of our gap that we're going to have to get a bit creative as we get towards the end. I usually find there is 1 plank right at the end that's a bit of a funny shape, just due to what we've been doing. And in this instance, because we've not done any tapering at the back, and because we've put this steeler in to let this fall naturally, we've got a much narrower gap here. That's fairly normal in my experience, and there's ways around doing that. We'll talk about the scientific approach another time. Right now we're just getting this covered. So I've done the usual. I've tapered and I've mechanically bended with our plank bender, and I've marked our middle place. And what we can see here is when we're putting the back end of this in, we are going to pretty much finish the planking at the stern there, but we've got quite a twist to put in here. So just at this point here where my finger is, we're having to put a little bit of a twist in the plank there. We could do that with steam, but I think it's slight enough that it'll just hold with the glue. So that's my gut feel. If you're in that position yourself, then you know, do what feels right. If your gut says I need to put this over the kettle and put a slight twist in, put a slight twist in. If you over twist it, you just steam it back up again and put it back. Here at this end, less of an issue, just normal tapering. We're gonna end up with a little bit of a gap, I think, when we put that down, but again, it's not a big issue. We are going to put a bit of filler in. So yeah, again, we could put a twist in there, but I don't think it's necessary. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the glue down and put it in and see how we get on, and that's then going to leave us with 1 plank left to put in, which will be a bit of an odd shape, and I'll show you how we'll deal with that. Just want to get rid of these little ends here first, and they're not in the way. Okay, so I've deliberately shown you every plank because I want you to be able to reference what I've done as you're doing yours. A lot of people, when they do these videos, they show you what they're doing on the first one, which is always the easiest, and then they show you what it looks like when they've done it all, or they'll show you 2 or 3, again, the easiest, and then they'll come back and say, there you go, that's all on now. And they might show you the one that's a funny shape, possibly. But I thought if I showed you every plank, then you can follow what I'm doing, or not, as the case may be. Right, when we get to here, we need to make sure we've got glue on both sides. And on the middle there. I think we're gonna be touching both sides at that point there as well, and we'll run glue about halfway just in case. Right, so I think that's what we need to do in the way of glue. So let's get nailing this on and see what happens. So as always, just move my stuff out of the way. Let's bring our nails round. Bring you in a little bit. Okay. So as always, first nail in the middle. Now you might, if you look around, you might find other people building this particular model, and you will absolutely definitely find that everyone did this planking differently. What I've tried to do is keep to the instructions, because as a complete novice, having never built one before, that's your first source of advice from the actual manufacturer of the kit. And in a minute, when we've finished putting the last plank on, we'll talk about all the little different things that may go wrong and how we resolve those. And then when we do our second planking, we will talk about doing it a bit more scientific, because at the end of the day, that's the planking that you're going to see. You're not going to see anything that we've done pretty much so far on this model. Just pushing that in a little bit, making sure it's not overlapping the plank above it. Push it up, nail it in. And when this glue dries, this is aliphatic glue, as I showed you before, it's actually stronger than the wood, so don't worry about it coming back up or popping off. Right, we're at that funny twist bit now, so a little bit of brute force and ignorance just to push the plank down into place. We don't worry about any little minor surface damage because this is all getting sanded anyway. We can use the positions of the nails above to locate the bulkheads. And then we can put a clamp on that last one, like so. Let's get the glue out of that gap. There we go. And then we can finish our nailing at the front here. Now, even if you follow me exactly, you will still come out with it being slightly different, because a few extra swipes of your sanding here and there makes a huge difference as you go down. Last nail in, and we'll just tidy up that bit of glue, because ultimately we're going to have to shape this front end so that we can put the facing panels on here. So just will save us a bit of sanding time if we've cleaned that up. Right, so as we look at this now, if I get a bit of an offcut, let me just get rid of all this glue that's leached out here. I'm at pretty much one plank thickness there, but more than one there. So what we want to do here is create this as two planks. So we're going to put a plank in that's actually thinner. So we'll take a plank, we'll trim it down. I could do it on my little Proxon circular saw, but we'll do it assuming that you've not got a power tool. So rather than this being, what is it? I've not measured it. Is it 4 or 5? What are we? 5mm. So if we make it 3, we've got 1.5, 2 possibly at the widest point. So if we did a 3 and a 4, I think we will fill that. So obviously 3mm we'll just about fill that line from there. So we'll have two almost the same length, so we'll fill some of this area, and then we've got a gap at the front now that is pretty much bang on 5. So if we do a 3 and a 2 at the front, that'll probably work. So I think what we'll do is we'll put one in along the bottom and then fill what's left. I think is going to be the plan for that. As long as we've got everything covered, doesn't really matter how we do it, because all this gets covered up. So I thought I'd show you this. This is on the side that I'm working on off camera, just to show you that things don't always go to plan. My strip has broken, and actually it's gone inside. It's there. It's now dried. The glue's dried. So when I put this next one in, I'm going to have a gap. So we'll look at repairing that as well. Show you how I go about that when we're, even though it's not on the side I've been doing on camera. All these little things that you're going to come across, and I'd like to show you them and how to resolve them, so you don't end up thinking you need to walk away from your build. Right, a little bit of a gap left to finish. What we're going to do is we're going to do it using 3 sections to fill this in. So the first section is going to be at the back end here. We'll put a triangular piece in. So we want our plank to terminate halfway through a bulkhead, so we can put a nail on either side, angled in to pin in the end. So our next plank, so that will be the first section. Our next plank will run along here like this, but we want to make it narrower so that we've got more wood to play with for that last little bit there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thin this down from 5mm to 3mm, and to do that it's the same process we've been doing with the tapering, whereas we'll mark it up and then just slice it down with the knife. So simply going to do 3mm from the bottom. 1, 2, 3. And then we've turned the plank round, so 3mm from the top. 1, 2, 3. And yeah, I'm just about long enough to do that, so that's good. There we go. And we'll just very gently score along the plank. Now if it's not exactly straight, it's not a biggie, because the next one we do, we're going to try and make fit exactly to what we've got left in the way of a hole. And there you go, that should be scored enough now. I don't think that's exactly perfect, but I'm not going to worry about it. Right, take that strip and put that to one side. This is our thin strip. So let's just test fit that. So we perhaps should have marked which bulkhead is going to be halfway, but it's going to be that one. So we put that halfway into that bulkhead there.
and let that naturally go where it wants. So we've got to just shape. I'm just going to mark a position. And we've got to just put a shape into that front end there. So if I just hold that in, about there. So we'll trim that off. Yeah, that looks all right. So let's get some glue and get that fitted. Now you could choose to drill holes in this so that you can put the nails in and not risk splitting it now that this plank's a bit thinner, but I think we'll be alright. It's good quality material, so I think we'll be okay. Okay, lost my lid. There it is, red on red. Okay, so let's get this nailed in. So I'm going to start with my halfway point on the bulkhead, and I'm going to turn it around because it's difficult to do that way because I'm right-handed. And we'll put one back first. Oh, that doesn't help, take that out. Try that again. And then what we do on this end one is we go in at an angle, but you do have to be careful. When you go in at an angle, you're much more likely to split the end of the plank. So if you're not sure, drill a hole. Okay, we'll put this next one in before we do that one. Before we can put this last plank in, we need to shape it, and to shape it we need to get a template. So we need to get rid of the nails before we do that, which means I need this glue to dry. So we will, I will have to leave that an hour or so, and then I'll come back, take the nails out, and then I can carry on. But for you, lucky people, you get that instantly. Right then, we need to put in one last plank in this section here. As you can see, it's a bit of an odd shape, so we can do lots of measuring and marking out and shaping and test fitting, or we can save ourselves some time and try and get the shape with masking tape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put masking tape over like so. And then we can draw the shape with our pencil. So we want to end there anyway. Got to say, this pencil's not going to show up too well on the tape, I don't think. I might go back over it in some black pen. There we go. So we've drawn the shape in with the pencil, and then we should be able to just stick that onto the plank and shape the plank that way. I'm going to go back over it with some pen, actually, it'll be easier to see. Now this isn't going to be perfect. It might need a little bit of sanding, further sanding once we've shaped it, just to make it sit in. We might need to chamfer it to make it sit in. We might have gaps, tiny little gaps on either side where we've over sanded it when shaping the plank. None of that really matters. What this is going to do, it's going to get us where we need to be pretty quickly, and it's going to save us some time, quite a bit of time actually, and then we can just adjust it once we've cut it out. There we go. We can lift that off, and then we stick that on our plank like so, and that pretty much gives us our shape. So there we go. I'm just going to wait for the ink to dry because it's going to take a little while on here, and then once that ink's dry we can start cutting away at this. So we're simply and very carefully going to slowly cut through our drawn on line with our knife. So there we go, we have our odd shaped plank which just fits really nicely into our space there. And what I don't want to do is bend this, because plank bending it with a mechanical bender, it makes it weak. You can get a hole where it breaks, you know. So if you want to put a curve on it at this stage, you want to do it with heat rather than anything else. But I think because we're sort of jamming it in, we should be able to nail it in and it'll be okay. But what you can do is warm it up with your fingers. Just put a little curve on it like that. There we go. So we can glue that in now. So glue in the hole of that gap. So both sides of the last plank need to be done. And the full width of the bulkhead. There we go. And we'll line it up with our little mark there. And we can put our first nails in. Now the problem is this is really thin and it's likely, almost definitely going to split the plank, and I sort of want it to do that so I can show you what happens, so you can understand why that happens. I'm using the row of holes from the previous nailing to align this one. Okay, that is that plank done. So we've just got one to do there, and that's nice and easy because it's a simple piece of tapering, so we'll use that as our flat edge, the bottom edge, and taper the top edge. So we're looking for a plank that's long enough to fill our gap. So if I get a pencil, so starting from that point there, I've just noticed there's a little bit of glue. Take that out. So starting from that edge there, and we're going to need a plank that goes to that length there, and we put that in. It's just slightly less than the width of the plank, so I'm going to work on the basis of it being the plank width, and you usually find it ends up when you've cut it that it's a little bit shorter. Now, just out of interest, I have 4 full planks in addition to what was needed to plank this, because this is the last little bit that's going in. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so. It's free, and if you'd like to support the channel, you can hit my PayPal link in the text below. Every pound goes straight into the channel to keep the cameras rolling and to do more fun stuff for you to watch.